Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to I Never Knew Inc., but my dog did podcast. I am Maureen Scanlon, your host. I am an author, a speaker, and a certified life coach, relationship expert. And as always, I'm going to be repetitive about what a fabulous guest I have on today. I still am in amazement every single time I get to connect with a guest who reaches out. And Jessica found me in a more unusual place. Usually it's my website or it's the podcast or even some of the like Pod Match and stuff. And Jessica reached out to me from Instagram, and I'm so happy. So there you go, listeners. You can find me anywhere. I always say I'm not hiding. I'm right there hiding in plain sight. But Jessica reached out, asked, you know what, I'd love to tell my story. And I was thrilled to have her. And especially once I got her story, guys, you're just in for a treat today. You really are. If you see her on YouTube on the video, you're just going to see what a shining light she is, how beautiful she is. And when you hear what she's gone through, you're going to be so amazed and just have so much respect for her. So let me go into what makes Jessica and what she never knew. So Jessica was born isolated from society in an abusive and extreme religious cult. She spent the first 26 years of her life in captivity till she was finally able to extricate herself from the deep brainwashing that was all she had ever known. And cults fascinate me, so I can't wait to get into this. I really can't wait. With years worth of repressed trauma and unacknowledged grief and pain, she began the arduous task to assimilate into the norm. And I love the way she says that. She had to assimilate into the norm. This became her greatest adventure of her life, with many highs and many lows. She was hiding a dark secret that no one in her new life had any idea of. She had deep confusion and pain from a life she had repressed and ignored, but was still eating away at her from the inside. She had depression and crippling anxiety that overcame her life, eventually forcing her to face her past. And as we know, guys, trauma just gets repressed. It doesn't go away. And she uncovered her repressed experiences, excuse me, that she had disassociated from. And it was terrifying for her. So much of her identity was crumbling as she faced memories she had no idea how to accept or understand. So this is her brave and painful journey that she took to unpack her past and singularly changed her life. And there's something interesting before I introduce her that I think she said that I love. I've had guests on here talking about plant medicine and psychedelics, and I love it. And I think anything that works for you guys, no shame, no gain. If it works for you, there's no explaining and no complaining, because you're individual person that you can't, there's no standard operating procedure for how we all work through our emotions. So she did work with some trained professionals using the plant medicine and psychedelics as a means to access and heal the past traumatic experiences. So I am so honored to have you here today, Miss Jessica Kahn. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I equally am honored to be here as well. So thank you for creating a platform to share and tell my story.
Yeah, this is you're the epitome of why I do this right here. This
Yes,
is
yes.
it. This is when you think you've had the most traumatic thing, and then you tune in, you're like, oh wait, Jessica.
Yeah.
It's like it's all different trauma. It's never, no
Yes.
one's is worse and no one's is better, but it's amazing. Like I look at other people's trauma and think, I don't know if I could have done that. And then I look at you and I'm like, wow, look at this girl. So
Mm.
let's crack it open.
Okay. Well,
Let's
well,
talk
thank you. Thank
about
you for, yes.
absolutely. So wow, you were born into it. So this was not something you chose. This was not something that a boyfriend got you into or a parent. You were born into it from your parents then.
That is correct. So my parents joined, and I was actually the first child at the cult to be born at home, which became kind of a cult rule unless there was an emergency. So I literally was born at home within the confines of the cult. So
Wow.
yeah, I was indoctrinated from birth, basically. And
Wow.
yeah, so we were very much separated from society. We didn't have television, radio, magazines. We had our own church, which was part of the cult and the indoctrination. We had our own private school, but schooling was, we went to school sometimes and then we didn't. It was more of a homeschool situation. So we were very self-sufficient. So we were able to contain ourselves within the confines of the cult. So we rarely had to engage with the outside world. So it
Wow.
was
So
pretty isolating.
no
Yeah.
regulation, government doesn't come in. Can I ask you
Yeah.
what is the name of the cult, and what does it tend to follow? Like which practices is it
Uh,
close to?
Absolutely. So it's no longer, about 10 years ago. And just, I have to be careful. So I'm not going to mention it just because the name of the cult, but I can tell
Okay.
you what we believed in and so forth, because I just don't know. I don't want any legal repercussions. But however, it was in
Completely
upstate New
understand.
York. Yes. It was in upstate New York. Our leader, who is no longer alive, and therefore the cult no longer exists. So about 10 years ago, it was, they ran out of money, the land was foreclosed on, and the leader passed. Um, but it was a Christian cult and very similar to Catholicism. So a lot of our belief systems, we had the daily mass, we call the Eucharist, which is the body and blood of Christ, and confession and Christian. We were evil, we were sinful. It was our, we came in with sin, and we were very chosen ones by God. However, we were very bad at the same time. And so it was this strange, like the outside world is bad and everyone is evil, and we're very special and elite, but we're also bad. But within the cult, they can, beat the devil out of us. There was a lot of physical abuse happening under the guise of helping us remove the evil that we had come in with in order to fulfill the chosen status that God had of us, which I think it's a very similar, you start to see within all cults, even within all religions. There's a lot of commonality in religion as well. And then our leader made it up, but it was heavily based on a lot of the beliefs of Catholicism, Christianity, and then he had been one of the original, I guess, co-founders or founding members, I should say, of the AA group, Bill Wilson's AA group in Chappaqua. And so he incorporated the 12-step program within our religious beliefs. So he believed everyone was an addict as well. So an innocent child, was an addict. I was an addicted to, being bad, like not being good in school, whatever it was became an addiction. So we kind of worked the 12-step program as part of our daily religious beliefs as well. It was very weird, and it changed at whim. So he would randomly decide, he would change the diet, he would change, every day we'd have to get up at 4:30 and do prayer time, but then he would change that. And so it was erratic, lots of changing of beliefs and changing of what we were meant to do. So very, very weird environment, I have to say. I can laugh about it now.
I
But
know. I'm just sitting here. My brain is going a mile a minute, and so is my pen. I'm just like,
Yes.
and I love that, being on the outside looking in now, you're like, wow, that was really weird. But this was like from birth instilled in you. And man, this is the power of the human mind right here in full forces, especially those formative years 0 to 6. I mean, that's so ingrained, and we're going to get more into that. I'm actually was studying before we got on, doing a diploma in modern applied psychology, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, the belief that the outside world is bad and that we're chosen, but we're still bad. It's that sort of grooming, obviously. I'm going to groom you. Any abusive situation involves grooming. We all know that, but grooming of children, when it's with pedophilia or narcissistic abusive mates, there's always this grooming. That's what that sounded like, that 12-step thing. And then the inconsistencies. I mean, that's really instilling some anxiety in someone where you just didn't know day to day what was to be expected.
Yes.
How scary.
It was a very volatile situation. And so you just didn't know. You're absolutely right. And you were basically always bad. So you were always trying to figure out what the next thing was so that you could like manage it before it happened, because it was erratic. And when you were told you were wrong, you were wrong. There was no, I didn't do this. It's like, you did this. And so there was forcible, like you had to take on sins and things you did wrong that weren't wrong at all. So it became very confusing. And then in the midst of it, they loved you too. So then you're a distortion of what love was. Because love, if you're good, we'll love you, but then you're bad, and there's no guideline day to day. So you don't know how to actually behave. So it was, it's all looking back in retrospect. It was terrifying, but I was so disconnected. I was surviving within that environment that I didn't even realize that until now when I look back and I think, wow, that was a terrifying environment.
Oh my gosh, especially, when you talk about it was surviving, and our brains have a way of protecting us. And so, you were being protected as you were going through it. And then as you got out of it, all that trauma was in there like, okay, now we're going to have to deal with this thing that's been instilled in us for so long. And how do we just experience it first? Because you weren't really experiencing it. You were surviving it. And then also think about how you develop these attachment styles because your family was in it. Your parents, believed in it. And so therefore, when our parents, it's not even just a cultural religion thing. It's like our family beliefs and values, they get instilled at the same time. So for you, that had to be so difficult. How was the family relationship and how is it now? Did you get mad at them for bringing you in?
I actually do love this question because I can answer it now full circle, having really healed, not just some swarmy, I forgive or I love, but going back quickly just to it was a very strange environment because my parents ended up becoming more like siblings because our family structure was our cult leader. And then, we had layers or levels there were hierarchy. So there were more advanced members, and that happened to somehow do with how much money they had and how much, because we were also a nonprofit. So there was a lot, we were surviving on the generosity of the wealthier members. So therefore those members also had elite status. But because we were at the mercy of our leader and those in power, my parents were also at the whim of any kind of abuse. So it became less my parents being my caretakers, providers, and protectors, and more like siblings. And I found myself in a dynamic where I wanted to protect them a lot. I hated when they were being punished. And so it was a strange relationship with them, but I loved them. And it's an interesting thing. I think my parents themselves were not the abusers, although there were times when they enforced because they believed it and they were also being abused and allowed certain punishments. They themselves were not abusive people. And I was able to discern that throughout my time there. Now that I've gone out and I've done real serious healing, not just like real serious healing, I am able I love my parents. I have a very good relationship with both of them. My mother, I was able to get out within a year or so. She kind of came out with me when I escaped. And my father almost came with my mother, my sister, my nephew, and I. And at the last moment, they got him and he stayed for many years. So there was a long period of time where I didn't speak with my father. But now we do. And I've been able to recognize that my parents' intention in the decisions they made they thought they were doing right. They thought they were giving us and themselves. And from that perspective, I really can hold no angst towards them because I can separate the wrong decision and say the intention was pure and in love. And I've also learned to expand my own consciousness to recognize I'm a soul, I'm a living consciousness that chose this life. And so from that perspective, I can also recognize that in my own way, I created exactly what happened so that I could experience this and evolve with the knowledge that I would receive from going through this. So all of that said, I have a really beautiful relationship with both my parents. I'm actually staying with my mom at the moment. This is her home.
That makes me so
yes,
happy. And
yes.
I'm sorry, but I just have to, and maybe I'm just a good detective, but this sounds very reminiscent of Scientology.
Yes, it's not, we're not, it was a very small cult, about 70 people.
Oh,
but I
small.
have, very, very small. And because he was involved with AA, he had gotten into a fight with Bill Wilson because he wanted to control AA. Interesting. Red flag. But so then he went and started his cult and he started All Addicts Anonymous. So we did have a small group of very desperate addicts who no one would take them in that were coming for recovery. So we had about 60, 70 members and maybe 15 or 20 people coming and going in recovery. So very, very small. It's not Scientology, but as I learn about all sorts of cults, I do see incredible similarities. And I think a lot of, whether they do it deliberately or not, the same tactics are used. So,
yeah, because
yeah.
Using that same format, it's that mind control where,
Yes.
The elite, the wealthy have the power. And I mean, I love Leah Remini. She's my girl.
Yes.
And the fact that she brought it out and called it all out. And she also, was brought into Scientology by her mother. So this is a common thing, and they're not in it either anymore. And I love that. I love that your mother got out with you, and I love that your father eventually did get out, right?
He did. Yes, he did.
Okay.
He did. Just a few years before. And, I'm very proud of my mother because she has done a lot of really intense work on herself to get to a place where she can, come to peace with, for her, it was, looking back, realizing the decision she made, how it affected her and us. And so she's an older woman who just does not stop growing. And I adore her. And she's a really special person. And she's also why, just having her as my mother, why I had the strength ultimately to leave as well and get her out. She instilled a lot within me, even within that environment. So
nice. She raised a very aligned girl.
Yes, she did.
and kudos to her because she was in the cult, and of course she had her husband, and then when you're going to get out, she's got mommy guilt. I mean, there's just mommy guilt.
Yes.
It never ends. Mommy guilt never ends until you are no longer on this earth. And I love that you said, I know that I contracted to do things in this life. I asked for some things. And I know a lot of people, and quite a few of my guests, will dispute that. That's, I would never have asked for that. Well, maybe not the specifics of it, but you asked for whatever it was to help your soul expand. And so even as devastating as 26 years in a cult could be, and people would say, why? She didn't ask for that. She didn't put herself in that. But I agree with you. I didn't want to be physically, mentally, and sexually abused by my ex-husband either. But I am grateful now because of that. So I'm so happy that you and I are definitely kindred spirits in that belief. So now,
and
go ahead.
I was going to say, I do understand, especially when you're really in the beginning stages of trying to address deep trauma that happened to you. A lot of times when we are victimized, I understand how that perspective is not helpful at the moment. So I just wanted to give sympathy, because when I was first going through this, if someone dared to tell me that I chose I don't think I could handle that. So, I do want to say that it took me a very long time, and I feel this perspective, as well as even being grateful, they're the beautiful byproduct of the work that we do to kind of process what happened to us. And so by no means is that, just saying, oh, it's I chose this, doesn't erase true trauma and true pain that someone's going through and been through. So I like to always acknowledge that, just because.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. We are not invalidating the experience in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you for that. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's the longevity of the process and the healing,
yes.
and getting through all of those emotions that later on you get
Yes.
just a bigger bird's eye view of why things
Yes.
happened.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
No,
Yes.
no, I'm right there with you. If someone would have told me I asked to have myself abused, no, I would have been like, are you crazy? I want a good life.
I would have punched them in the face. Had a lot of anger back then too. So I would have
like, throat punch you, excuse me. And I think what's really interesting that I had said to myself a lot, and maybe this will help any listeners that are going through this, is I would say over and over to myself, but I'm really intelligent. I'm so intelligent. How did I let this happen? How did I not get out of it? Why did I let this? It has nothing to do with intelligence, and it has everything to do with love and attachment styles.
Yes.
As a human, what are my needs? I need to be connected to the people that I love, and whatever that entails and wherever they are, we just tend to do that. So
I agree. And what I also found in part of my understanding, also in understanding my parents, was that if we are not, and this is kind of the journey that I went on, if I am not connected with myself and my true power within, no matter how intelligent I am, no matter what, then there's an aspect of me that's susceptible to other people's beliefs and other people's. And so that's part of the journey that I came to, was this. At first, I wanted to fight it all. I wanted to fight the cold. I wanted to fight every injustice that ever existed on this planet. And I was out with a lot of aggression to take on everyone. And what I learned was, I don't have to fight the system. I have to empower the people. I have to empower myself. And that once we are empowered, which means connecting with our truth, and we're aligned within ourselves, nothing can actually, no one can take advantage of us. None of these things can happen. And so that's what I learned in my journey, was that my job is right here within me, for me. And when I do that, I'm protected. Nothing can get to me in that space. So
yes, the empowerment of choice. And you went from revenge to repurpose. And that's part of that healing process. It's like they talk about the stages of grief. I think it's just the stages of life. I was angry, I used to be angry. And I think that anger is just that pain coming out. And then as we process that anger, we get to that place of, okay, you don't just flip from this place like when you came out. You weren't like, okay, I'm going to be in peace and I'm going to live happily ever. No, I've got to process all of this. But I think once I got past it wasn't even like I went from anger to peace, or I went from anger to happiness. I went from anger to just not caring anymore. And I remember that feeling when my ex would show up to pick up my kids, and I would be like, oh, I feel nothing. This is awesome. I just didn't want to feel anything. It was great not to feel anger anymore. I didn't have to feel forgiveness for him. And I didn't have to be like, oh, we're all going to get along, kumbaya. No, I still to this day don't want to see him or talk to him. But it was nice to get past the anger to just being okay with not feeling anything. How did you feel when you got out of the cult? And how did you... I think the biggest question I have is the balance between the people that you knew in the cult and then the people in the new world. Like for you, how do you bring that to a place of understanding?
Yes. So, and I think it's very common within cults, or there's some churches or religions out there that are very culty as well. Where it's this if you leave the church, if you leave the cult, if you leave the thought, the beliefs, then you're bad, you're evil. And so everyone turns. So there was definitely that. I was able, my whole escape story is a whole process, because I got to a point where I became aligned with my truth and I started to speak out. And I didn't leave right away, because I wanted to protect my parents and other people there, and some of the younger children that I had sort of taken on, and was doing as best I could to protect them. And I kind of negotiated my terms of leaving, so to speak. And that's a whole story. I'm writing a book as well, and I explain that. But, where the outside world always used to be very terrible, when they no longer could control me because I sort of separated. And it might be similar to maybe a woman in a battered relationship. I don't know, but where you're in the environment that's unsafe, but you found your voice to some degree. And so the abusers and those in power their same techniques no longer work. And so, you go through the series where they try to be more aggressive, they try to impose more. But then when they realize, at least in my case, when they realized that they couldn't use those methods, they weren't working. I had separated myself. I don't know if this is healthy or not, but it was my mechanism at the time. I thought, I'm not going to leave because there's people here I love, and I feel that me leaving will leave them in harm. However, I don't agree with what's going on. And when they do discipline me and do these methods of control, I'm going to disconnect and kind of leave my body, which is something I had done my whole life. But it allowed me to stand and speak my truth without fear. And when I became fearless and I spoke my truth, others within the cult started to listen a little bit. And then I was a threat. And so they had to rewrite their story that God had spoken to them and called me out of the cult. And so at that point, I was able to say, okay, but my friends need to have you need to give them the same blessing, so to speak. And so I was able to leave with two friends that I had also worked from the cult that I had grown up with. And so we left together. There were the three of us. So we had a little bit of that support. So at least I was with two friends. We were all very brainwashed. Did not know much about the world, but at least we could navigate together. So that was a blessing, and that helped. And I always say there's a few things that were difficult. First of all, growing up in an environment where I was basically a trained dog, where every decision, including what I could wear, what time I could get up, what I could eat, was dictated to me. Making a choice was very hard for me because I had never really used the right to discern, and it felt scary. And I was also still indoctrinated in right and wrong, good and bad. If you make the bad choice, you're a bad person. And so it became very confusing for me. There was also the fact that there was just a lot to learn in the world, but it was also a blessing because I was very naive. And so I didn't quite understand. So everything was new and exciting, which ultimately brought its own problems. And things happened because I was naive and didn't understand. But one of the things that always stands out is that I started meeting these bad people that were out in the real world, and they were filled with love and compassion and acceptance and kindness. And they didn't judge me. There was no right or wrong. It was just me. And that was a very new environment for me. And I flourished very much in that environment, realizing that I was okay just as I was. There were no sins to confess. There was no punishment to be had. There was just simply to be and to be accepted. And so that was kind of my first experience, navigating and what was the outside world like and how I did it. So.
Yes, that's very similar to being in an abusive relationship, because
yeah,
I know when I was in these relationships that were so toxic, I emotionally checked out long before I physically checked out.
Yes.
And
yes.
so you were like, and I think that's just human of us. We have to prepare,
Yes.
We have to mentally prepare before we physically do anything. And then the gaslighting,
Yes.
the changing the narrative, like you said, and then
Mhm.
you go to finding a support system. So I think, but listeners, this is really interesting because really anything we're going through, she just laid down the foundation through whatever it is. Those are the things. Find a support system, become strong
Yes.
of mind and prepare yourself. And, you had an identity crisis. My goodness, you were
Yes.
this person
Mhm.
for 26 years, and now
Yes.
you're almost like a newborn baby in a whole
Yes.
different cultural shock and environment. And it could be dangerous, because at 26
Yes.
years old, if you've been in society, and I don't like to say normal, but I mean, if you've been outside of a cult system where you haven't been controlled, you learn what's dangerous. You learn how to navigate the world in a safe way. And you could easily be thrown out there in dangerous situations. And and we were talking off air, guys, because I have a compression glove on today. And I said, I have my Michael Jackson glove on. And Jessica says, I wouldn't have known that reference, but I do now know that reference. So I said, I think I'm a sponge of pop culture and just learning everything about everything, which is kind of fun because like you said, it was adventure. Like I'm a sponge about
Yes.
learning. So
Yes.
how was that? Are there any funny stories about something that you did that, people would go, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about how you wouldn't know that?
Well, I spent a lot of my first years just pretending like I knew things, but I would get in very like people. I'd be like yes, yes, and they would actually inquire further or ask me for the name of the lead character in a movie. So there were moments where there was just strange, awkward silences, and I kind of after a while, well, I didn't talk about my past for a long time, and so it became. I actually was always very afraid to go out with people one-on-one because I was so afraid of just normal conversation, not being able to catch up or to talk about the things. And it was scary. I had a lot of social anxiety. And if I ever had a friend and they wanted to go out, I would do everything to try to find another friend to come out so that we could I could get lost in the conversation.
A buffer. You wanted a buffer.
A buffer. Yes. So that was interesting. And now, I'm way more open about my life. And so all my friends now, I mean, it's a joke. They're like, oh, they start to pop culture reference. They're like, oh, Jessica has no idea. And I don't. So it's so much more relieving being honest and just telling people. But
you would love my husband. I'm sorry to interrupt. You would love my husband because I don't have a very good memory and he references old movies all the time. And he'll make like a comment and he'll go, that episode on blah, blah. And I'll go, I don't know what you're talking about. So my husband would have been wonderful to integrate you into society because every time I don't know something, he pops out the phone and brings up the YouTube of the episode he's referencing, the movie he's referencing. So technology is a good thing for that. You could always just pull it up real quick. You'll be like, let me go to the bathroom for a second and let me pull up that Seinfeld episode so I know what you're talking about.
It's so true. It's so true. And we do laugh at ourselves, I mean, even just, I never waxed my eyebrows and just like certain like physical hygiene that, it's embarrassing. But, even like, our friends would, we'd all go over to a friend's house and everyone would bring something, but we'd show up with nothing because we didn't understand, like socially, like when you're invited for a picnic for the afternoon, like you show up with something, you contribute. So little embarrassing social cues, but we were pretty good about picking it up fast as well. But yes, but I wanted, one thing you had said, and I think it's so important that the similarity potentially, and I don't want to wear anyone else's hat or claim to understand what anyone else has gone through, but potentially a similarity between that experience in a woman, perhaps in a domestic situation. And I really want to reiterate that support. And I don't know how, if I didn't have my two girlfriends that had come with me, I don't know what would have happened to me. And I think sometimes I failed to give that enough recognition. I did have two other, granted we were all in the same situation, but we had each other. And so I think it's really important that you said that earlier. And it made me think, and I'm like, yeah, I did have support in a way that maybe others didn't. So
I promise you would have done just fine either way. When I got out of my situation, I was alone. I had never felt so alone in my life. I didn't have support. I hid the abuse from my family. So my parents didn't know. And I didn't have, I couldn't have girlfriends when you're isolated like that. You're not allowed to, have these close friends. And so, but I promise you would have been fine, but you contracted to have your girlfriends. And I think that's super, that's wonderful. And I think on that factor, it made it, easier. I don't want to say easier. That's a terrible word, but when you, I don't want to say it like this either. Misery loves company, but I'm saying when you have that support, that's why we have support groups, because it's so great to have someone that says, I know how you feel.
Yes.
And I think that's why in my coaching, I only coach on the things that I've been through and that I
Yes.
understand, because I can sit in front of people and say,
Yeah.
not only do I understand what you're going through, I've been there and I know how that feels deep inside. And
Yes.
so much of what we experience in life is so relatable. So
Yes.
thank you for saying that. But I'm so happy that you have support too, and listeners. That's just it. If you don't have friends, if you've been isolated like I was, there are groups. There are, especially with technology now, there's, meetup groups, there's women's groups, there's support groups. There's so much support out there now that was never out there when this was in 99 when I was getting out of it.
Wow.
So
Yes.
yeah, we didn't
Yeah.
have internet, we didn't have cell phones. So it was really feeling alone. Now at least you're connected to the world.
Yes. Yes. It's very brave of you as well, especially with children. I can only imagine. That was, yeah.
That's what kept me going. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like saying, if I didn't have kids, well, how different would it have been? It doesn't matter, because you know what we contracted for what we
Yes.
did. And
Yes.
thank
Yes.
goodness, the lights of my eyes, and my grandkids are here
Yes.
because of it. But, so tell us, after you've done this, I'm not skipping over the process, but once you did the trauma healing, how did the plant medicine and the psychedelics and the I know the shadow work is difficult, that deep work. And then when you were able to get through, what was life like? And what was your mindset about life, the future?
So great. Okay. So, and it's all within the last 5 or 6 years. So I spent 15 years trying to find myself in the world and thinking that all I had to do was just check all the boxes that this outside world told me would make me happy. So I got a successful career in a sales career, medical sales, and I traveled the world, and I had friends, and I had relationships and failed relationships, and I was very normal, and I was desperately unhappy, and I was so depressed I could barely function. But I'm in this outgoing career where I have to be bubbly and form relationships. So I have these two worlds, this despair and, just pain where I don't know how I'm going to get out of bed in the morning. And then I go out and live this fake false life. And I was really lost, and I didn't understand. I did not address any of my past whatsoever. I had just picked up and started life from the moment I left the cult. And so, and I had tried all sorts of things. I was trying psychiatrists and psychologists and, this healer and that meditation. And I really was searching, and nothing was really working. And then so about 4 or 5 years ago, a friend of mine, an older gentleman, who was a bit of a mentor for me in my career, started talking to me about plant medicine and psychedelic and plant medicine. And I was very scared. And I was, for like over a year, I was like, it's not for me. It's not for me. I had also had a medical condition at the cult, and I was having seizures, and I was very afraid that what I thought playing around with this kind of things was going to aggravate that as well. But he was part of a really loving community, and I was going to these groups with him, and I was hearing other people's stories of deep trauma. And mind you, at that point as well, I had let me finish that and then I'll back up for a second. I had spent most of my life in complete denial. I knew that the cult was weird, I would say it was a little weird, and there was some extreme things, but I had completely disassociated with the intensity and with the true abuse that happened. And, it's probably a survival mechanism. And so even at this point, I'm in deep pain, but I haven't connected. It's like, oh, my past was weird, but it's not, I'm pretty normal. This didn't happen to me. This didn't happen to me. I don't qualify as traumatized. And so I hadn't even really connected that there was deep trauma from my past, but I was very depressed. And I started to see these people started talking, and I started to be like, oh, that sort of happened to me. And maybe that is more serious than I thought. And eventually I participated in the plant medicine experience, and what it did. This is such a big conversation, but I say there's two things that it did. One is I experienced joy for the first time in my life. And I think That is so gorgeous, because how can I, they say manifesting is feeling what we want to, you embody the feeling. But if you don't know what something feels like, how can you possibly bring that in? So to me, that might have been one of the greatest gifts. If I can feel joy, I can go out of this experience, and now I can bring that feeling in, and I can start to bring more of it. And then it also allowed me from a higher, because it takes us into a higher consciousness. It takes us into a more full understanding of a soul level and beyond. And it was there that I started to understand, okay. So that at that level, with that understanding, I chose these. And then I got to start to see the exact reason I chose it. I got to see why these experiences and what they brought to me. And then on top of it, it allowed me to access really either memories that I had forgotten, or memories that I had remembered, but I never addressed or never brought up because they were too challenging. From that state, I was able to go in and visit them without getting re-traumatized. And by doing so, with this expanded understanding of the experience, I could then authentically retell a story. So my small child had put in whatever happened to me, all men are dangerous, whatever my various stories were that I was carrying with me now as an adult who was no longer being abused. I could access those memories when a story out of defense or protection had been made that was running now in my body. And I could go back with full understanding and retell that story. Okay, that happened, and I validated what happened, but here's where we are today. And look what we have as a result of this. And so by retelling that story, there was a new pathway of understanding. And so it was a trauma release, basically. I was able to go in, feel, process an emotional charge, then retell that story associated with that memory. And that completely changed the entire landscape of my emotional body, my physical body, my mental body, spiritual, and so forth. So that's, and there's of course,
I just love that. I love that. I mean, I'm on board. I want to go do the same thing, because
yes,
I love that, because it removes the fear. And that's really what our
yes,
trauma, our triggers is this fear of feeling that same thing that we had felt previously. So it's that
yes,
memory, that
yes.
subconscious memory. I gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh,
Mhm.
I had a gentleman on one of the episodes. Guys, go back and look at it. And he does trauma informed retreats, and he lives in Peru, and he uses ayahuasca.
Yes.
And I just think it's just such a beautiful thing. And as you were speaking, I was picturing going to a bookshelf, opening a book, reading a story that used to be really scary, and you didn't want to read it. It was dusty. And then you picked it up and you read it, and then you were able to shut it and put it back on the shelf, and you can go back and read it if you want to, or you don't have to.
Yes.
And you're no longer, it's not a scary book anymore, is
Yes.
how I
We
pictured
release
that.
a releasing of the emotional charge. So that, because what happens when we access those memories and we haven't processed, our body goes back, that it's still there. And so we access it and we go into panic, where by accessing it in a gentle, kind, loving, with help with this medicine, we don't get re-traumatized, but we can release the emotional charge. Because at the end of the day, that's all really what, our trauma is it's emotional charge, it's energy, because those experiences are no longer happening, but our body is in a constant state of that experience. And so we release it and allow it to, disperse, and it's not being held. And I always like to preface, it's not for everyone, plant medicine. And I think it's incredibly important to find the right people working with the medicine with the right intention. Because unfortunately, there's some misuse of it. It's being used. So I would just, if people are interested, definitely connect with your intuition, connect with your body's reaction, as you're searching, and find the right people, because it's just important. I think it's really beautiful medicine. To me, it opened doors that it's changed my life, and in a very fast way. So I have a lot of respect, and I really believe in this. However, I just think it's very, very important. I was very lucky to have a good group of people really using this medicine in its true integrity. So I just always say that as a warning because, I want people to enter cautiously, as they
Absolutely.
explore
There's
this.
always
Yeah.
going to be those individuals that want to take advantage and they
Mm-hmm.
don't do things the right way, but they do.
Yes.
There's options of doing retreats. So there's options of doing,
Yes.
there's clinical where that you can go use
Yep.
it. There's
Yes.
also, I know horse tranquilizer.
Yes.
So there's so many. I'm happy from the mental health awareness standpoint. For me, I want everybody to live their best lives and have this joy every single day. And so
Yes.
I'm so happy that life coaching has been embraced and the plant
Yes.
medicine and the psychedelics, because we need help. We need
We
help.
do.
This problem doesn't go away. And, our generation after generation, we need to do better. And you look at, our great grandparents or grandparents. I mean, these things were unheard of. It was, shut up and put up, and that's it.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
maybe even my parents' generation, we just don't talk about it. We sweep it under the rug. And then, I'm hoping and praying that as I do my work and as other light workers and mental health workers embrace all the options and no judgment, because I want someone to have any and all ability to help
Yes.
themselves, right? Because no
I
one's going to
agree.
fix you but you.
Mhm.
And you're not broken. You're just used to protecting yourself and your human
Yes.
mind in the way that your human mind was created to protect you. So
Yes.
we just have to find a better way, right?
I agree. And by the way, just it's the documentary on Netflix right now, Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind, is a brilliant documentary. It really walks through. So anyone that's interested, it's a great introduction to this medicine and so forth. And so I thought I would give a plug there because it's very helpful. I'm very passionate about using these medicines. So, if someone's considering, it's a very informative documentary to help. But you're absolutely right.
I love it. All natural.
Yes.
Being that I started as a nurse in the medical
Oh,
field.
you did? Oh, I didn't know that.
And I was in the medical field, the laboratory, for 26 plus years. My opinion of medical, and it's been no secret as I've done these podcasts, my opinion of the medical system is it's for the sick people. And it is not for the well people, and it is not to keep you well. And I think anything that's natural, plant-based, anything out of the ground that is of Mother Earth, millions of years we've had this natural stuff all over, so we're not adding chemicals and all that. And
Exactly.
I'm an advocate for medical marijuana. I'm an advocate for marijuana.
Yes.
Even though I can't do it, I'm allergic to it, believe it or not. I wish I could, but I cannot, unfortunately, because it would be great for my arthritis. But CBD works good too. So
okay, that's good.
Yeah, so I just don't get the fun effects of the THC. The CBD definitely works, but I am an advocate for homeopathic medication, naturopathic medicine, and plant-based everything. So I'm right on board with you.
We're in sync here. You know what's so interesting? And you said that, I agree wholeheartedly with our medical industry. And I think it also, and I think people such as yourself in coaching are bringing forward this, which is that we've approached our mental healing in the same way we have our medical, which is let us get rid of the symptoms without actually facing the cause. And I think that same thing goes in our own personal journey and healing. I just wanted my depression to go away. And I just kept trying all these external things that would make it go away. But I wasn't asking myself, why is it here? And same with medicine. And unfortunately, the system, our medical system, is just about, okay, you have a symptom, get rid of the symptom. But no one ever says, why does your body have eczema? Well, that's your digestion. That's an internal situation. But I always often correlate that with also our own personal healing is, when I have these depression, when I have these symptoms that come up, I by no means live a perfect life. I now see that as a language. My body, I'm depressed. I ask myself, why? What is it within me that is now manifesting that? There's something that I haven't paid attention to that's now extreme and I can't get out of bed. And so I think that can be helpful also in realizing that we don't have to live with these symptoms, but we do have to address the why. And that also started my journey when I finally was like, okay, why? Because none of these medications, external distractions, are taking away this deep internal pain. And
Yeah.
that is also what started me. Okay, then what is going on inside? Who am I inside? Where's this coming from? And I like to also,
yeah, it's always going to
Mhm.
manifest itself physically, until
Yes,
you've,
yep,
I mean, that's the root cause. So we need to get to
yes,
the root
exactly,
cause of it.
exactly.
And we weren't
But
doing
of
that
course,
for all these years.
yes, and we're scared of the root cause. There's a reason we're not getting to it. It feels scary. I know a lot of times, even this personal work, it feels scary. And I was running from myself for so long. And then when I actually started to get to know myself, I started this personal journey. It becomes exciting. It's like, even though it feels frightening, and those dark shadows that we are afraid of, it's just about turning a light on. When we turn that light on, literally, we're like, oh, okay, I see. It's not a scary monster in the dark. This is a little girl that just wants a moment to explain to someone what happened to her, things of that nature. And so it started to become less scary and more exciting. And it was almost like an adventure then. Like, who am I? What's the next clue to finding myself?
I love that. And I think a big part of why a lot of us don't do the inner work is the shame
Mm-hmm.
story. It's the
Yes.
embarrassment of
Yeah.
blaming ourselves. And when we
Yeah.
remove the blame on ourselves and we just say, hey, I'm just a human having a human experience. And
Yes.
then when I connect, so I get to have a conversation with Jessica about my shame story, and you talk about your shame story. And now we're on the same level. And now, hey, I'm ready to face it. And hey, it's a lot
Yeah.
easier to talk about it.
Yes.
And it's a lot easier to let it go. So I think
Yes.
when we get past the the shame
Mm-hmm.
and the blame
Yeah.
that we do to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves,
Yeah.
that's why the world is talking about stuff today, and mental health is
Yeah.
okay to say
Yes.
I'm not okay, and suicide prevention and abuse and all those things. Now that we're able to speak of them, I see a movement that's changing where it's okay now. And we have 988. You
Yes.
can pick up the
Yes.
phone and dial
Mm-hmm.
for help. Um,
Yes.
there were moments when I was suicidal after my
Yeah.
divorce, and my son saved my life. I remember one
Mm-hmm.
night, he was crying. He never woke up in the middle of the night. He was about, I don't know, 10 months old. And I brought him in my room. And I mean, I literally was thinking, maybe they'd be better off without me. Maybe I don't know that I can do this. And I went and got that baby out of his crib,
Mm-hmm.
and I brought him in my room, and I would usually just give him a bottle and put him back to sleep. And I put him on my bed, and
Sorry.
that's okay.
Sorry for that. Excuse me. Sorry.
That's okay. Universe calling. And I remember putting him on the bed, and I remember the look that he gave me, Jessica. And the look was just, I was his world. I was his universe. And I remember thinking, I'm here because no one will ever love those babies the way that I do. And there was no one to call. There was no one to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm thinking really negative thoughts. Or, hey, I don't know that I want to be here anymore. And I'm grateful for the communities now that are embracing this, and
Yes.
the 988, to be able to have a real person on the other line that says, I'm here, I'm listening, you're going to be okay. So
Yes.
that
Yes.
was
Yes.
a little bit of my soapbox. So as we wrap
Yeah.
up, I
Yes.
have I have to do my two questions. So
Yes.
you're marching downtown and you have all those people of the town behind you with your banner. What does your banner say about the change you want to make in the world?
I want people to remember who they truly are and find their truth. And it starts by questioning, and it starts by questioning our beliefs, because I believe that what we believe will lead us back to our truth. And when we connect with our truth, we remember who we truly are. And I believe that if we're all connected to the power within, we can change this world. And we can change this world one person at a time, individually within ourselves.
Yeah,
So
but
that is,
just
yeah.
being true to yourself, being in
Yes,
alignment with whatever your purpose is here on this planet.
absolutely. And it does require, at least, with I thought my beliefs were mine. I had to question them, because I think a lot of us, we just take on beliefs that we never question from our family, it's not that anyone's wrong, but that is disconnecting us further and further from our actual truth. So we do have to do some questioning to sift through beliefs that we thought were ours or that we inherited, to truly and honestly find out who we truly are outside of everything else. So
I love that. That is one of the first things I do with my clients in coaching.
Yes.
Is we work on false beliefs, because
Yes.
sometimes we just don't know they're in there. In fact, I was just studying about Freud,
Mm-hmm.
where we have the ego, the superego, and the id, and the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. And wow, what you want to do is get your conscious and your unconscious together to your subconscious. And that's meditation. That's the state, is meditation, is getting in that middle space, and self-awareness is going to give you the best life. But figuring out there are things that are tucked down that I didn't even know about. We can't remember everything. Okay. We have a storage bank, but every day you take in, I think it's 120,000 pieces of information.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know I learned this in NLP when I took my NLP course. And so you take in about 120,000 pieces of information. There's no way the human brain can retain all of that. So what your mind does is either discards the stuff that doesn't matter, or distorts it to your beliefs. And so what happens is that distortion is what creates the things that are our behaviors, our values, our goals, all those things. We have to make sure we're checking in with our distortions. Check in with your memory bank and make sure, is this value linked to a distorted belief from my upbringing, from what someone said about me, a surrounding that I witnessed, that sort of thing. So I know I'm getting really deep in psychology right now, but it really is such a big part of it. So I'm going to lighten it up at the end here. I think self-care is so important. It's why I love the dogs, because they're masters at self-care. And so I want to know, what is your shameless self-indulgence?
I can't say marijuana.
Yes, you can. Absolutely. Go for it. My son would be right on board with you.
I do enjoy. But my shameless indulgence is, that is a great question. I think what I'm on, I don't know if this quite answers it, but is finding joy in everything. For so long, I lived in such a state of lack and unhappiness that I got very comfortable. And so now what it is, my challenge, it's more of a challenge, is finding the happy moments within everything, really challenging myself to, my natural instinct is to go on more of the negative side, but if I can allow whatever it is, and so when something comes up, I'm like, is this going to make me happy? Am I going to have fun doing this? And doing things for the pure sake of the enjoyment of it, without any kind of restrictions or rules. So that kind of, like, at any given moment, that could change, that individual indulgent, but it's more about, I'm after joy, I'm after happiness, it doesn't matter if it's momentary. I want to experience happiness and joy. And so within that, whatever that indulgence is at that moment, I say yes. I say yes to happiness. I say yes to joy. So
that is amazing. And I mean, I've had a lot of answers to that on many podcasts, and it's everywhere. It's mostly ice cream. Many people love their ice cream, but
I like ice cream too.
It's symbolic. It's symbolic of finding that thing that's yours, that thing that brings you joy. And you make a really good point. You don't know what you have till you don't have it, and you never had it, and now you seek it and you refuse to not have it. And
yes, I think and maybe that's very more specifically to me, but to me, like, sometimes it is ice cream. But I lived so much in restrictive rules that it was always about refrain and stop, that for me, it's about yes, it's the little girl, whatever she wants. You want the lollipop, you can have it. You want to go swim, you can do that. So yeah.
I am 100% on board with that, because we deserve that. We deserve that
We
in
do.
this
We
life.
do.
And I think we hold back so much, and people don't think that they deserve, especially when we're working on fitness and our physical and our health. I see so many people sacrificing that stuff. And
Yes.
I love
Yes.
food, and I'm sorry, I want my carbs. I love
Yes.
bread and
Cheese and bread. Yes. And ice cream.
it is so hard, because I feel like I'm depriving myself. So I think obviously everything in moderation, but I love your view. Your perspective is I just want joy now. I want to
Mhm.
seek joy. And that's what, if anything, listeners, you take from this
Mhm.
is take that is every day,
Yeah.
find joy in
Yes.
everything that you're doing, even when it's those monotonous things.
Yes.
I think that is, we always say later, tomorrow, or after this happens, I'll do this, or
Yes.
when I do this, then I'll have that job, or when my kids are grown, then I'll go on that vacation. We have to stop saying someday, sometime, later. I think that for me, it's the embrace the moments and that mindfulness.
Yes.
And I'm not saying go spend the mortgage money and be frivolous, but I'm saying with moderation, find something every
Yes.
day that brings you joy, as small as it is. Go have your bowl of ice cream, or go
Yes.
outside and, sit in the grass and just look at the sky, listen to the birds. We have to find something in each day that grounds us to, I'm here to enjoy life, not to hustle and just survive till tomorrow. Right?
Exactly. Yes.
All right, my dear. Well,
Exactly.
you are such such an inspiration. Your story is compelling, and I can't thank you enough. I'm so honored. Thank you for this time that you gave to us. And listeners, if you want to get a hold of my lovely Jessica, where can they find you?
So I am on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, all at mytruth.mystory. So mytruth.mystory. And also you can send me an email if you want, and that is mytruth.mystory.contact@gmail. So I'm very much here I'm an open book, and I just, I want everyone to know that they're not alone. And if I can assist anyone in any way find themselves, their own truth, I'm here. So
I really, I think, guys, if you are going through anything, she would be such a great support system. And I know that for her purpose is to help others and help others heal. And that's, I think, a lot of times the strongest people go through what they go through because they are strong enough to bring that forward to the next person and to help the next person.
I do. Yeah.
And I cannot wait to hear to read your book. So
yes,
she's got her manuscript written, guys.
I do. And I just got it out for a read, and it's great, but I thought I was like almost done. I'm like, okay, time for a publisher. And I realized I got to go back, and there's a bit more work on it. So it's in progress. But if you find me on one of my socials, I'm keeping everyone up to date. So I'll keep everyone, informed as the book progress goes along. So thank you. Thank you.
Go join her Facebook group. Go stay in touch with her so you'll know when that book comes out. What are you calling the book?
So as of today, the title is called I Remember Now.
Oh,
and then the subtitle is My Truth, My Story. And there's a reason, because at the end, there's a lot of points that, first of all, in writing the book, I'm remembering things, of course, but more importantly, the mission of the book is that I believe we've all just forgotten ourselves. We're not actually broken. We don't need to find anything. It's an act of remembering. And so I Remember Now, obviously, is, it's a statement and an affirmation. But before that title, which is why I say by the time I'm done, maybe there'll be a new title. I wrote the first draft of the book. I was still quite angry. I was still accessing or remembering things for the first time that were very intense. And so the title was Fuck Sugarcoating. Here's My Truth. Excuse me for the F word.
No, you're fine. You're
but
fine.
It was very, in that moment, the title of that book, There was a lot of anger. I was like, this is my story. Don't tell me what to say. And it was very healing. So now I'm in the I remember now stage, and that may stay, or there might be a next stage. Who knows? But My Truth, My Story is the subtitle, and you'll always find everything about the book there. So
yes. I mean, that's authentic. That you were
yes.
in the fuck sugarcoating stage.
Yes,
You were like,
I was.
no, I'm not going to put any spin on it. This is my story.
Nope.
This is what I lived through. This is the real facts. And I think
Yes.
as an author myself and telling my story, writing nonfiction,
Yes.
I know writing it, you go into that place of fear too, where it's like, oh gosh,
Yes.
I hope my mom's not upset. Oh, I hope my ex doesn't find out. No,
Mm-hmm.
into the fuck sugarcoating stage too with book 2
Yes.
and book 3. Book 3 is going to be like, I get it. I know my book 3, and I have a title, but I'm not going to disclose it here. But book 3 is going to be Now I Know, because instead of I never knew.
That's great.
But
I love that.
And that's really, it is a phase. And I think writing of any kind, and especially listeners, even if you don't publish, I think writing your story for your legacy, for your children, your grandchildren, or anyone, to really understand who you are, or just journal, because it is freeing to write stuff down and to get it out. Sometimes we just don't want to talk about it. We don't want to share it, but you can write it down, and it can be your own personal, your diary, your whatever it is, your release. You can burn it. I tell a lot of my clients, go burn it in the backyard. Write a letter of forgiveness to people that have harmed you. Write a letter of forgiveness to yourself. Give yourself a permission letter. Write a permission letter. Like writing is so, I just think it's prolific to let that go without having everyone feel like you're exposed. But if you want to write and get published, it's a good experience, and it takes bravery and courage to get to that point, because it's out there, and you do have that risk of critics and people who aren't going to understand, and just people are just judgy in general. But when you are aligned and you love what you wrote, it's your story, like you said, once you're aligned with yourself, then you don't even care. I don't care what anybody says. And to be honest, 99.99% of my 5-star reviews are positive, because people relate. People just want to relate to you. And I always say, stay focused on the lovers, not the haters, because there's a lot more lovers in the world than there are haters. So choices. So thank you again, honey, for being here. And I can't wait to just stay in contact with you and see your journey and read that book.
Thank you. And thank you for having me today. And thank you for the work that you're doing as well, because we're all doing very important work. So kudos to you as well.
Absolutely. We're all soul family trying to better the planet, right?
Yes. Coming from heart. So yes.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.